a note to all aspiring writers, producers. You're going to be known by your reputation more than your songwriting. I'll say it again. You're going to be known by your reputation more than your talent. So it behooves you to behave well with others, do equal splits, be open-minded. Don't shut other people's ideas down. You want to be known as the good hang, and that will get you further in your career than any song you ever write.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. 3rd edition, out now everywhere, all formats, audiobook, hardcover, ebook, however you like books, you can find the book. Today, my guest is Danny Ross. He is a producer and songwriter based in New York City. Danny and I go way back. We did the SongCon together, which was a songwriting camp and conference a couple years back that I know some of you listening to this attended. He is also a writer. He has a column with Forbes. And if you have my book, the quote on the cover of the book that says "Indispensable" by Forbes, that was Danny. That is. So thank you, Danny, for that quote. And now the biggest thing that he's done and what he has gotten a ton of press for is the Antisocial Camp. This is the world's largest songwriting camp. There are over 250 individuals, songwriters, producers, artists that come together in New York City every summer for the world's largest songwriting camp. If you don't know what a songwriting camp is, don't worry. We get into that. That's the first question that I asked Danny, so just stick around. In a couple minutes, he's going to explain all of this. Now, the camp also has hosted Jacob Collier, Miranda Lambert, Moby, Nile Rodgers, Andy Grammer, Kimbra. Andy Grammer, previous guest of the show, friend of the pod. Kimbra, JP Sachs, Rob Thomas, and brands like TikTok and Spotify and YouTube and Amazon and Tidal and the Recording Academy and Republic Records and DistroKid and many others. The MLC, they're part of this camp as well, and they host events, and he's going to get into all of this. And if you do want a badge, he mentions the badges. We've put the code there down in the show notes, so you can check that out if you want to attend some of this. But songwriting camps are a fascinating phenomenon, and we go all into that. So if you are a songwriter or a producer and you're wondering about how pop camps or hip hop songwriting sessions or country songwriting sessions go, we get into a lot of that throughout this discussion of how just in general songwriting sessions go, but then also how songwriting camps go that are hosted around the world and stuff like that. And this is a really incredible thing that Danny has built. Very happy that he was able to come on and discuss it. You can find Antisocial Camp on the socials, specifically their Instagram, Antisocial Camp. You can find the Antisocial Producers Club. Also, that's where this all began. That's the website, Antisocial Producers Club or antisocialcamp.com. Find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on the socials. Find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. But right now, if you wouldn't mind, just pause this episode, give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button if you want this show to populate your feeds. And then visit aristake.com and get on our email list. That's the best way to stay in touch with us. Get on that email list. That's how we can let you know when there's new episodes, new stuff about the new music business, all of that stuff. All right, let's kick into the show. Danny Ross, welcome to the show.
Ari, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So we're gonna talk about the Antisocial Camp, but before we get into that, just to give people some understanding of what a songwriting camp is, can we just start at the foundation? What is a songwriting camp?
Absolutely. A songwriting camp is a large number of recording sessions in a short period of time.
Okay.
Usually these are very exclusive events in exotic locations. An example would be a Rihanna camp in a chateau in the south of France.
Ooh, I want to get an invite for that.
Me too. But
is that for real? Or are you making this up?
I'm making that up, but that's pretty normal. There are songwriting camps famously in Bali, for the who's who of songwriters and producers. There are songwriting camps in castles in Ireland and Scotland, all across Europe and even in like mansions in Malibu. The idea is it's a sort of compound of the rich and famous to make a new record for some very well-known pop star.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so historically, songwriting camps have been a they have been curated or so by the artists or the artists. I'm assuming label A&R, and they invite songwriters to write songs for the artist's next record. And now, are the artists typically at these camps, and are they in the sessions, or how does this work? How do they work typically?
Everything you said is correct. I think sometimes not. Sometimes
Okay.
it's just the A&Rs or the managers. I'm exaggerating to say this is the only version of songwriting camps that exists. There are plenty of publishers, for example, or sync teams that will have a sync camp or, a Warner Chappell camp. But in general, this is sort of a new innovation in the music industry over the last 15, 20 years, something like that. And how Antisocial Camp is different, and we'll get to that a little bit later, is that we are the first front-facing festival-style songwriting camp with, and the largest songwriting camp in the world with hundreds and hundreds of artists, writers, producers involved.
Right, and I do want to talk about it, but I think this idea of a songwriting camp is so foreign to a lot of people, and I know that this is now so common to you and everyone in your world, and so I'm going to challenge you to really to forget everything that you know about songwriting camps and pretend that you know nothing, and that's where I'm going to be coming from, because I want to just break it down, and then we'll build it back up. And then I'll show the magnificence of the antisocial camp. We'll talk all about it. But I don't think we have a grasp on what a songwriting camp is just yet. But I want to keep going with this. So if I understand it correctly, you're saying that within the last 15 years or so, this is this new phenomenon where a bunch of songwriters come together. You said a bunch of recording sessions in a short amount of time. So talk to me about a difference between it. Because when I think of a recording session, I think that is like the artist is there and they're making a record, for their album or for a single or something like that. But when you say recording sessions, what do you mean by that? Because then you just said that the artist sometimes is not there at the song camp. So how can you do a recording session without the artist?
So these days, a writing session and a recording session is the same thing.
Okay.
And essentially, if there's usually a brief involved, right?
What's a brief?
Oh, great question. A brief is the instruction for the day. Let's use this Rihanna example. 15 people in a house trying to make the next Rihanna record. What does that mean? 5 rooms with 3 different people in them, producer, songwriters, some combination of both. And usually those songwriters are excellent vocalists as well. So they will put down the vocals of the demo when it's finished, but they will get together. They will write a song either with an acoustic guitar in the room or with a piano in the room, but more likely creating a beat and listening to reference tracks, throwing down drums, bass, get something going. And then create what's called top lines or melodic structures of a song, versus pre-chorus, melody, post-chorus, bridge, etc. And by the end of, let's say, 4 or 5 hours, you have yourself a demo. The top liner will sing vocals in that demo, and they'll record it like a real track because they're trying to sell it to the artist. And by sell it, I mean trying to persuade the artist that this is a song that should be on their next album. So you're trying to make that demo as professional as possible. And in doing so, you have 5 different rooms going. That means 5 different songs in the course of one day, for example. And then you do this 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. You walk out with 20, 25 songs. You can then show to the Rihanna team and say, what do you think? And perhaps that she uses some of that on her next album. Does that help to explain the beginning of this process?
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. That makes sense. So for an artist like that, they bring together right. And so for like typical pop songwriting sessions that are not necessarily surrounded by camps, I know that there's oftentimes, like you said, there's a producer in the room, and they sometimes call the driver, and they're the ones driving the session. They're literally sitting at a laptop and they're pressing the buttons and they're making what you called it the beat, which is colloquially like the instrumental production, I guess, but we call it the beat. And then oftentimes in these songwriting sessions, there's like a producer that's driving it. There's a top liner, like you said, doing the vocals, and maybe another writer in the room or something like that. And is it safe to say that most songwriting sessions have like 3 people or so, 2 to 3 people, 4
Yeah,
people?
I think 3 people is the average, sometimes 4, sometimes even more than that. But usually what it is it's a producer, like you said, the person at the computer driving the session, basically doing all the engineering and structuring the song. And they're sort of the captain of the ship, right? They're reading the room in terms of momentum and vibe. So, and usually they're responsible for doing a lot of the instrumental work, as you mentioned, which are almost completely digital these days, right? Drums, bass, synth sounds, guitar sounds, all in the box.
As they say.
Of course, as they say, which means like created using sounds through MIDI and through the computer and DAWs like Ableton Logic, etc.
Cool.
Right. So producer, a top liner, which is just another a modern way of saying songwriter.
Top liner is like the vocalist. So it's they're the singer or the rapper, right?
Right, but they're also responsible for coming up with the melodies or the top line, as well as lyrical content as well.
Okay.
Sometimes what happens is that the top liner and the artist will huddle into a corner, think through a concept of a song, of what happens in verse 1, into the next verse. While the producer is like honing in on a snare sound, right? So it becomes this very like division of labor between technical and the creative, something like that. But, my favorite sessions is when everyone is doing everything. And there's a real sync up of all parties involved. And then frequently the third person in the room is the artist themselves. And usually, just from a business standpoint, what you want is to have the artist in the room, because who's going to know better about the narrative of this song and what happens in the course of that relationship than the person who's singing it, right? They'll have more buy-in and more emotional connectivity to the song if they wrote it and they were part of the process from the beginning. So that's typically the lineup. But then there are songs called outside songs, in which songs that are written outside of the artist's accessibility in the room. And then they are pitched to the artist. And that's what happens frequently in a lot of these camps for larger artists. Or they will be starting points, at which point Rihanna would jump in and help finish it and guide it to be more the type of song that she would sing in concert.
Got it. Super helpful. Okay, so yeah, in the Rihanna example, those are like outside songs. So there's a camp that might be scheduled for go out together. And when you mentioned brief earlier, a brief you're saying is kind of like maybe Rihanna is looking for songs about her breakup. So we want breakup songs, and we want them. She's really into reggae or something, so let's get a reggae feel for some of these. And so then they're going to get like 25 reggae breakup songs or something from this camp, right?
By the way, I'd love to hear that album.
Well, right, for sure.
But that's exactly right.
Yeah, okay. So like you mentioned, in like non-camp songwriting sessions, oftentimes, the artist is in the room. They have some buy-in. They're a co-writer on this. A lot of artists we know are co-writers. Rihanna historically is not a co-writer on most of the songs, most of the cuts. And of course, yes, the superstar pop artists are not usually in the room initially. We had Kevin Garrett on the show, and he had a cut. He learned that he got a Beyonce cut the day the album came out. And so they didn't tell him, he was talking about, he's like, woke up and Lemonade was released and he was track number 1. He's like, wow, cool to wake up and know that you got a Beyonce cut. And you like, that's a thing. And so like, right, a publisher submitted the songs and stuff like that. So it's, songwriting sessions, especially like the, pop sessions and hip hop sessions, it's such a interesting concept, I think, for a lot of artists that aren't in LA, Nashville, Atlanta, or New York. And we're going to get to New York in a second. But, like LA and Nashville, this is day in, day out. There are these songwriting sessions. And it is people like, especially in Nashville, it's their job, day job. It's like they clock in, clock out. They like go in, they're doing, a couple sessions a day during the day. They go home to their family at night, and the like it's a business. Now you're in New York, and I know that you started with this antisocial producers club based in New York. Talk to me about initially what that is all about, because I think the conversation in the industry for a while is kind of ironic, oddly enough, like New York hadn't really been part of the conversation for a little while. It had been LA and Nashville, but I'm curious kind of, as a lifelong New Yorker, what your standpoint was behind all of this.
Totally. What you just said has been the narrative in the music industry for a long time now, which is everyone left New York and moved to LA and Nashville and London and Atlanta and Miami. And there's no one left here. I would say that's partially true, for sure. And I'm a writer-producer myself, jumping into these sessions that we're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. And as I was making my way around the New York City music scene, learning about the network of people that were here, it was abundantly clear that there's a rich pool of talent that's here, songwriters, producers, artists. And it's the New York City music scene hasn't really had a spotlight put on it in the way that it should. I think there are a few reasons for that. One, because there's some truth to a lot of people moving away. But I think it's also true that New York has been a tough place to live economically. And I know LA these days is probably just as difficult to live in.
Not as expensive as New York from what I've seen and heard. But
is that right?
Yes, it's getting up there for sure. Yeah, but it's definitely.
Yeah. And look, there's like systemic issues and that are real. That I live here in New York. It's expensive and it's hard. Yeah. And what I'll say is, I learned about this incredibly diverse and talented group of people making my way from apartment to apartment. Another part of the sort of just the natural layout of the city is you're going from one apartment studio to another, and these people aren't talking to each other. You're in the subway for an hour to go from Harlem to Bushwick, right? And there isn't a community hub. And my day job for years, while I was in bands in my 20s, I think you and I are on the same age, Ari. Mm-hmm. And we were probably pursuing our own artist projects around the same time, was I worked in government. And I worked for a congressman. I worked in the New York State legislature for 10 years. And community organizing was a big part of my job. And here I was in music, seeing disparate parts not talking to each other, and thought, hey, let's find a way to bring people together. And so during the pandemic, it was sort of a perfect opportunity to be like, hey, writers, producers, artists in New York City, let's all hop on a Zoom once a week or once a month and like talk about producer stuff and songwriter stuff, from plugins and gear to like A&Rs that are good and maybe artists to potentially avoid, things like that. Just insidery, fun community things for us as a niche. And within a year or two, there were hundreds of us, which was really an amazing thing.
All in New York.
all in New York, all New Yorkers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Cool.
And so, for the first time in my music career, actually, I saw a hunger for community that I had never seen before. And that sort of evolved into this idea of, hey, why don't we just put together a massive event, which became the largest songwriting camp in the world.
Wow. Yeah. So that's cool. So I didn't realize that Antisocial Producer Club kind of came out of the pandemic, and I guess as everyone everywhere was like yearning for community, and so naturally, I mean, COVID just physically separated everybody, but you kind of saw that. But I've heard that New York can be a lonely place as it is, even when everything is open and alive. Even though everyone is slammed together on this island or like, boroughs and stuff like that. But so then, yeah, how did that come to the camp, and when did you first start the camp, and what is the concept behind the Antisocial Songwriting Camp?
Yeah, so we did this the first time in 2021 when the pandemic was still happening. So it was all over Zoom.
Oh, wow.
And now we're entering our 5th year. Immediately after starting 2022, we said enough of Zoom. I think the whole world said enough of Zoom, or enough of virtual meetings and especially virtual recording sessions. It's a really hard thing to do. Have you done virtual sessions?
Yeah, I made my album actually over the pandemic with my producer who lives like, 5 miles down the road.
That's
and
funny.
we were using audio movers and Zoom. And
Yeah.
he's like,
Yeah.
I'm literally tracking vocals here. And he is like screen sharing and running my Logic on my computer as I'm like tracking vocals and guitars back here. I'm like, man, I wish I could just come to your studio to do all this. Yeah, it removes a lot of the magic and a lot of the fun of the process of doing sessions in studio. So yeah, I don't miss that. Let's just say that I don't want to go back to that.
Totally same. And virtual sessions have remained a little bit to finish songs that are like 80% of the way there.
Okay.
Which makes a lot of sense. And in fact, we're doing that at the camp this year for the first time, which is just finish your song that's almost done for a few hours over Zoom. But yeah, it sort of evolved from that into, we want to build this community in New York. Oh, we all want to meet in person post-pandemic. Let's just celebrate these communities that don't really talk to each other. And like songwriters and producers who know of each other from a distance to all come together, all be in the same place at the same time, experiencing the same thing. And in that way, it becomes like a real summer camp, actually, because you're hopping around from different recording sessions, jumping back into evening events. And by the end of the week, you've made your new homie. That's your new collaborator for life. And we have so many amazing examples of that.
Awesome. So tell me, how is this structured, and how many people do you have that are part of this, and how does this camp work and the songwriting sessions work? And yeah, give me the breakdown of all of it.
Yeah. So, we mentioned the Rihanna example where there's a brief to write a Rihanna song for the 15 people who are part of those sessions. We have 250 artists, writers, and producers at this year's Antisocial Camp. It's the largest songwriting camp in the world. And 10,000 people applied. Which is overwhelming, and I wish we could take them all. The brief is the artist will be in the room with you. Write the next hit single for the artist in the room before those 4 hours are over.
Okay.
So you have a short period of time, and I'm sure it's filled with pressure, but hopefully everyone feels relaxed and happy to be there and making music. And, our camp is about, as songwriters and artists and producers ourselves, this is an opportunity to celebrate each other as a community and create the kind of festival that we would want for ourselves. So all accepted artists attend completely free. We don't take any percentage of the songwriting or the master recording
Publishing.
In the room. Exactly. The publishing or the master. And we just try to create incredible opportunities. So there's a Spotify showcase, there is a YouTube showcase, a Grammys gala, a title playback party, a TikTok artist lounge and creator studio at Republic Records.
What does that all mean when you say showcase or
Mhm,
playback party?
mhm.
Are like a Spotify showcase? Does that mean like the editor? Or what does that mean?
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
Yeah, tell
So
me how
we
that.
work with the Spotify team to bring in 25 artists from our roster to perform one song each. And the
That they
Spotify,
wrote like that day or something?
oh,
Or
not
oh, okay,
not necessarily from the camp, but any song that they would like to
got it.
play.
Okay, cool.
But they will. This is the day before sessions start, so this is sort
Oh,
of
okay,
a way to get to get.
icebreakers.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, get to know each other through their music, through their performance. Okay,
That's
cool,
right. And the Spotify editorial team is there and present and are part of the process. And the same
cool.
is true for our YouTube writers round the next day. Um, and our playback party at the end that we do with Title is hearing back the 200 songs that were just created for straight hours of new music.
Wow. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. And how do you are you pairing these 250 writers together and putting them into rooms?
I am now personally very lucky to have an amazing team around me, as you are, Ari.
Yeah.
And um, I personally remove myself from the curation process so that some of my good friends, I don't have to tell them that their artists have been either accepted or not accepted. There is a committee and a curation team that is incredibly detail oriented and one goes through the entire application process, but then also listens very carefully to the music that these artists, writers, producers make, and try to you take an educated guess in terms of the chemistry of how these
Mm,
people would work together, and it's always exciting on paper. Occasionally, you get a few that these people just don't like each other, and there's nothing you could have done about it. But for
yeah.
the most part, I think everyone is really open minded, really just enthusiastic to be there and willing to try and make great new record together.
Cool. So tell me about how you guys, how your team puts these rooms together and how many sessions and well, like how many people are in the room and just like all of that.
Yeah, so it's about 3 to 4 people
Okay.
in each room. There are 30 recording studios across New York City. Maybe it
Oh,
might
wow.
be up to 40 that we use, right? So it really is kind of like South by Southwest in that way. We call it
Cool.
a South by Southwest for songwriters,
Hmm.
in that we take over the whole city. It's the 40 different studios and venues across New York over 5 days.
Mm, cool.
Um, and yeah, we're listening for genre, such a loaded word, but just listening for the kind of style that artists, writers, producers make, and you try to hope that if you pair a certain combination together, that they will create something magical. And we also try to even put them in the kinds of studios that focus on the music that they make. So, for example, there are studios that focus on hip hop, and there are studios that focus on alternative music, and studios that focus on pop and indie pop. And we try to make sure that these artists are making and creating in the type of environments that can breed the best possible song.
And then when you're pairing these people together, I'm assuming you're putting like a producer, a top liner, and
An artist,
or
yeah,
maybe a couple top or an artist in the room together, something like that.
exactly. That's exactly right. Yep. And we
And when you said the brief was the artist will be in the room, write a hit song for the next record. Is that make believe or is that actually like the artist that is in the room? They're writing for that artist who is in the room, and idea is that the artist in the room is going to put this song on their next record.
that's exactly right.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
the artist might get a great song out of the thing too that they
Yeah,
could release.
right, exactly. That's exactly the idea. Is they walk out with their next hit single. They walk out with some brand new collaborators that they're thrilled about, and professional opportunities by meeting with all these brands that and performing for them um,
Nice.
in a front facing kind of way.
Yeah. What genres would you say that the camp is focusing on or specializes in?
It's a really interesting question. And every year it's very surprising to see who applies and who we end up accepting. In general, especially for New York, I would say the most dominant genres have been straight pop, hip hop, a lot more dance music lately. And actually this year, more than ever, country, which is surprising for New York City. But not surprising.
After Beyonce made the country album, just opened the floodgates, and
Totally.
Shaboozey having the biggest song of the year as this crossover country hit. I mean, yeah, country is now blurring the genres, right?
Yeah. And country, for all those reasons, has never been more popular. So, the applications that we get and the incoming we get in terms of genre is very much dependent on like the mood of the moment. And so it's, I guess, not entirely surprising that country is having this moment.
So, I mean, that is fascinating because that would make your job challenging, I would assume, because country songwriting is so dramatically different than pop songwriting or hip hop writing. Do you intentionally place rooms together as like, okay, this is a country room, this is a hip hop room, this is a pop room, or you're like, good luck, guys, you got a country guy, you got a hip hop producer and a pop singer, and you put them together and we're like, let's see what you guys can do?
No, that what you said is exactly what we do, which was, hey, let's put some of our more country oriented top liners with the country artist, and maybe the more sort of analog recording producers in the room too, to capture some natural sounds. But sometimes it's really fun to mix it up and be like, all right, you've had a couple sessions that are kind of straight country. Like, what if we threw a rapper in there too, with everyone's blessing,
How many sessions does each person do over the span of this week?
We try to do 3 sessions per person for about 250 plus people.
Wild. That sounds like a logistical nightmare to me, but props to you for facilitating that.
It's a year's worth of work for 1 week. That's what we like to say. We do nothing else full time.
Right. Wow. Okay, cool. Hats off to you and your team for that. And so tell me, like, what's the takeaway? Like, what are people walking away? And you mentioned you had some success stories and stuff like that. So tell me some of these success stories that you've heard about from the camp.
Yeah, I mean, one is we have plenty of songs that have come out of the camp that have gone on to be released on major labels, right? And that's very exciting. Part of the curation process too is creating opportunities for up and coming, emerging writers, producers, artists, because we want to create opportunities for them, and like, let's throw them in with a big major label star if we really believe that they can contribute in a meaningful way. And like, let's get them their first major label cut. That's a really exciting opportunity for someone like me and my team who grew up and continue to be songwriters ourselves, and are excited to see young people get new opportunities. Forgot your question.
Oh, just success stories. But
success stories,
mentioned, I do actually want to ask you about a major label cut.
Sure.
So tell me how a major label cut differs from an indie label cut, differs from a self-releasing artist that has a big following cut. What are the difference between those 3 scenarios? Self-releasing artist, indie label, major label.
From a producer songwriter point of view, you're going to get the most money from a major label.
And how does the money work?
How does the money work? Oof. Oh, the big questions.
When you
today,
say you're going
Ari.
to get the most amount of money, I think a lot of people don't really understand what that means. Is it because they're going to get more streams, but that's not always the case. But like, what do you mean money? They're going to get more money?
Yeah. So the label would buy the song from you, the producer, and they would give you an upfront fee for it, in addition to your back-end royalties which are complicated and come later. Songwriters, I should mention, do not get upfront songwriter fees. In this way, from a business point of view, it is better to be a producer than a songwriter. I think there have been movements to change this, but I don't think there really have been much result yet.
Right. I mean, famously, Justin Tranter, who's a massive songwriter, one of the biggest hit songwriters in the world. He's got a gazillion, hit songs, platinum records, et cetera, et cetera. He's now started a label where they're giving songwriters points on the master, which has never been done before. And then Ross Golan, who's another hit songwriter, he's got a publishing company. He represents songwriters. And he was saying that he is getting them paid for sessions and upfront fees as well to be in rooms, which also has really never been done before. I mean, some of these big camps, I know, maybe the Rihanna camp or something like that, they will pay the songwriters a little bit to be there, and then they'll get publishing, of course. But the upfront fee, right, historically has been reserved for the producer. But now give me some ranges. Like, what are we talking about in terms of what an upfront fee is for a producer?
Sure. So if it's an independent release, right, it's maybe someone who's a friend of yours that, let's say has less than 10,000 Spotify monthly followers, maybe less than 10,000 Instagram or TikTok followers. I would say somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000.
Okay.
But I think a good rule of thumb is if a label is buying it from you, you'll probably get about double whatever that fee is. So
if a major or if an indie label?
Good question. I would say major, and I guess I think an indie label would be probably somewhere in between.
So a major label, break that down for me. Give me that range.
Yeah. So let's say you produced your friend's song, and she puts it out on just her own Spotify and streaming. Maybe she on the higher end pays $3,000 to you for one upfront fee, where she owns now 100% of her master. Great.
Mm-hmm.
If an indie label did that, let's say it's probably closer to $4,500, and if it's a major label, you probably get $6,000 for that same track. If that helps to give you a range.
Cool. Okay. So, interesting. So what you were saying, if we bring it back to the camp, some of these songs that have come out of the camp, you said we've gotten major label cuts. So theoretically, that producer that made the beat, or at least made that session, made the recording of that demo that day, the major label would buy that from them for, like you said, like 6,000 or something, 7,000, something like that.
Right. And then, by the way, like your superstar producers, I've heard stories of $100,000 for one song, right? As a producer fee, which are, some of the big names. So, and it ranges, right? And there's also negotiating that goes on with attorneys and all that stuff.
And break that, but let's keep on the money kick, because I know that's where that's the time when people's ears are perking up here, is when we talk money, because it's hard to find this information anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone that you've been close to a lot of this, you kind of know what's going on with all of it. All right, we've covered the upfront fee. So let's say it's like a lesser known producer coming out of the camp or something. It's an emerging producer. They're getting, $6,000 or whatever for that. And then what else do they get? You mentioned back-end royalties of some kind, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there are two kinds of back-end royalties, right? There's publishing, which is the songwriting. And typically that's split evenly between everyone who's in the room. So if RAU, me, and our buddy Jimbo wrote a song together, the three of us would split the songwriting royalties evenly three ways, 33.33%. And if the song went on to make $1 million in publishing royalty, then we would each see 330,000, 33,000, et cetera. So that's kind of easy to explain, but master royalties are harder to explain. Basically, if it's a question of who owns the master recording. Now, if I understand it correctly, the way that the industry is structured right now is that the producer, until the song is released, or a deal has been made, if you're the producer in that session, you own 100% of the master in that moment.
Okay.
Because it's literally on your computer.
Right. Okay.
And basically, I would have to, if I was the artist, I'd have to buy back from you the master percentage. And like you mentioned before, songwriters, top liners typically don't participate in this master royalty pool.
Right.
So if I spend an upfront fee of $3,000 to buy the royalty from you, I will then own 100% of the master backend.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. And the songwriting we've already discussed. So,
so you spend $3,000 and now you own 100% of the master. I know producers that we've heard about points on the master, points on the record, producer points. What are producer points?
Points are like a major label way of discussing the same thing, because you're dealing with massive quantities, right? So if you have 100,000 records sold and you have 4 points, that means you take away 4% of the $100,000, which adds up to decent amount. And if it's millions of dollars, then it's 4% of the millions of dollars. But when you're dealing with like quantities that are pretty low these days, because the streaming age has changed things financially for the worse for money, for artists and creators, the way to think about it is in terms of percentage, right? How does, especially in an independent deal where you're the producer and I'm the artist, and if like 4 points in a major label way could translate to 25% of the master recording, something like that. There's sort of a different math that goes on in the world between us normies than up in the castle on the hill.
Right, because traditionally major labels, a major label deal with an artist, majors would keep like 82%, was this like thing. It's the 82% thing, and then the artist gets 18%. And so if the producers get 4 points, which means 4%, that's because the artist is only getting 18%. But now if you're talking about like in an independent self-releasing artist standpoint, 4 points and the artist getting 96 points, that's not how it works. It would essentially kind of be, 4 divided by 18, which what you're saying is like in the major label scenario, 4 points and the artist has 18 points, and that's like 22% or whatever, 25% if you round up, and is that kind of the loose calculation of how you come up with, the producers getting 25% in that situation when an artist is self-releasing?
Right. That's exactly right. It sort of translates into that. And that was pretty good, like, pen on the napkin math right there.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
I was impressed.
So when we're talking about, so I want to just get back to this example of the producer is selling the recording for $3,000 to the artist or to the label, and are they also getting points in addition to the sale? Is that common?
I'll tell you a common scenario is if you paid me $3,000 as the producer, and now you own 100% of the master. Sometimes in these deals, after you've been recouped those $3,000 by streaming or sync or some other way, then I, as producer, can also participate in your back-end royalties and collect 10, 20, 25% of the master recording too.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Right, and that's of the master recording, not like, and you did a great job of breaking down the difference between the publishing and the master, because it is very different. Early on, we were like, we wrote the song, we each have 33%, but you, as the producer, you have 33% of publishing, but then you have 25% of the master recording, which is totally different. And so, this is a very confusing part, and I'm assuming of the 10,000 applicants to this camp, and of the 250 that got selected to this camp, not all of them understand how splits work. I would maybe argue most of them don't understand how splits work, especially if they don't have publishing deals. They have never gotten cuts like this before, and they've only really been in sessions with their friends. Is there any education that goes into this, or recommendations of how splits work when you put these people in these sessions?
Yeah, great question. One, read Ari's book and listen to his podcast.
It was not prompted, but I appreciate that. Thank you, Danny.
Quick plug. Two is we do give everyone several split sheets throughout the week, and we ask and encourage them, at least on the publishing side, encourage them to do equal splits. Of course, you can't enforce that, right?
Sure.
But we try to create an environment of, equanimity. Is that the word? I don't think
equanimity.
Equanimity. We try to create an environment of good collaboration between good collaborators.
Cool.
Sometimes people don't play by the rules, though, and they ask us to get involved, right? And say that this person is asking for X amount of percentage and it's ridiculous. And I say, I agree, it's ridiculous. I'm sorry, I don't know what to do about it, except maybe not have that bad actor back in our festival next time, right? So,
right.
And that's sort of like a note to all aspiring writers, producers. You're going to be known by your reputation more than your songwriting. I'll say it again. You're going to be known by your reputation more than your talent. So it behooves you to behave well with others, do equal splits, be open-minded, don't shut other people's ideas down. You want to be known as the good hang, and that will get you further in your career than any song you ever write.
That's great. That's great advice. Because if you're going to go to battle for a few percentages here and there in the long run, it's going to work out to be that you have stopped getting invited into sessions and rooms, and you have no more friends, no more calls, and it wasn't worth the battle. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, which I also have heard, is there are some superstar artists out there who will go unnamed, who will try to strong arm the songwriters into cutting in that artist to the publishing when the artist had nothing to do with the songwriting. Can you speak to that at all? Have you seen that?
Yeah, that is unfortunate. It's true. It continues to happen, and I think it's been happening, since the 60s or something like that.
Famously, the current, there's a famous story of Elvis wanting to sing "I Will Always Love You" by Dolly Parton, and Elvis' manager, the Colonel, said to Dolly, you're going to split the publishing with Elvis, even though he didn't write the song. You guys are going to split this 50-50. He's going to be a co-writer on this. And Dolly said, in her way, go fuck yourself, in the real Dolly way. I don't know if it was those exact words, but it was essentially that. And it worked out in her way, because then, of course, a couple decades later, Whitney Houston cut the song and made a massive hit, and guess who still has 100% of the publishing of that song? Dolly Parton.
Crazy. Yeah. Yes. So here's the thing: is that the artists have all the leverage here, right? Because the song can either go on this massive pop record that will get potentially billions of streams and help make your career, or it will sit on a hard drive and no one will ever hear it, and your career will not progress at all. your choice, right?
Yeah.
And of
Yeah.
course, like those without leverage, in this case, the songwriter or the producer, say, fine, I'll take your percentage as long as we get to be on the record, right? And they're trying, writers, producers, you're trying to create a narrative and an arc that's building momentum. I was on this big artist's record, and I was on that big artist's record. So to lose an opportunity, even not just for the money, but for the narrative of your career that you can then later sell to get into bigger sessions, right? And take bigger jobs. It's worth taking the hit. But is it wrong to leverage your position as an artist to insert yourself in the publishing when you had nothing to do with the songwriting? Yes, it is.
Yeah, and it's tough because, um, I for the record, I don't support that practice whatsoever. If you did not have a hand in writing the song, you should not get publishing. Full stop. Period. But that being said, I do understand the challenging position that artists on major labels are in the sense that they're not getting paid from dollar one, where theoretically the songwriters are. And if it becomes a hit song, that artist honestly probably won't see much of those royalties whatsoever, because they have to recoup the cost of their advance. And the major label, with their financial trickery, the artist might actually never see any royalties from that recording if they didn't have a hand in writing it. Whereas the songwriters, only for hit songs, and let's be very clear about that. If you have, a deep cut on even the biggest record of the year, you're not making that many royalties unless it's on the radio. And that's like what a lot of songwriters have said, is that, performance royalties, which are generated from when your song is played on the radio, is really where they're making their bread and butter. It's not streaming anymore these days. But these songwriters are getting paid from, dollar number one on the publishing side, whereas artists don't. And so I understand why these managers are trying to look out for their clients. I still think it's completely unethical and they should not be doing this. But that's, it's a broader conversation of how the industry just needs to change its ways overall, because speaking of equanimity, it is just not equal, and it's just there is no equanimity when it comes to all of this.
And like, to your point, Ari, and I feel like we've been citing example after example. If we could start the music industry over again,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
no way in the world any of these practices would make any financial sense or like rational
Logistical
sense,
sense,
any sense, right? We're just like
right.
inheriting this like
Yeah,
mess, right? And
yeah,
we're like
yeah.
trying to explain the mess to like each other and your listeners. And we're all doing the best we can, but
Yeah,
doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
it's so messed up. Well,
Yeah.
you're also a Berklee College of Music professor,
Yes.
The New York campus,
That's right.
which before you took this job, honestly, I didn't even realize there was a New York campus. So speak to that. So what are you teaching there, and how do you break these concepts down for your students?
Yeah, well, I try to break them down in the same way I'm breaking them down for you and your listeners right now, because
Nice.
these are high concept, complicated things to explain at a very base level to people who know nothing about it. And by the way, to your point from earlier, I don't even think some of these like well-known, established stars, artists, understand a lot of what we're talking about, and I barely do, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a professor at the Berklee NYC program. It's a one-year master's program, not to be confused with the Berklee College of Music four-year undergrad program in Boston, famously.
Right.
And I teach in their production S&P program, songwriting and production. Yeah, I'm a professor there to teach folks about the business side as we do now, but primarily to listen to their music and to give insights on songwriting and production, and to advance their artist development, full stop.
Nice. Cool. And getting back to the camp, I know there's a lot of opportunities outside of the sessions, like you alluded to, these like showcases, listening parties, playback parties. I saw there were parties. Are those exclusive to the 250 members that got selected for this camp, or who are all part of these events?
Yeah, so the 250 artists, writers, producers are going to every one of these events, as well as industry and brand, music industry and brands, A&Rs, managers, publishers, labels. Uh, However, we realized we've created this slate of 10 events, these highly produced events, from the Music Hall of Williamsburg to a Recording Academy gala with 1,000 people, red carpet event. And we would like to invite in as much of the music community as possible to come to New York, or if you're in New York, to be here and part of it. So for the first time, we are making available limited VIP badges that for one set price, you are invited to come to every single event of Antisocial Camp throughout the entire week, not only to meet and rub shoulders with some of the best songwriters, artists, producers in the world, talk to them, learn from them, but also to be in the same room as a lot of these major brands as possible, and create an opportunity for career development for yourself as a creator. So we would love to sort of. We also have a special discount code for ARI listeners to grab a badge.
What's the discount code?
It's ARI Antisocial VIP.
Cool. And what does that get people if they want to use it?
That's going to get people $100 off a badge.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
And they can go to, what's the website?
Antisocialcamp.com.
And then click on the badge.
Or Instagram as well.
Nice. Ari, say that code again.
ARI Antisocial VIP.
Cool. We'll put that in the show notes so people can find it.
Right on.
Just if they can. ARI Antisocial VIP. Nice. Well, cool. And I know that this camp is coming up when this airs in just a few weeks. And so what are you hoping that comes, like, what are you looking forward to, I should say, about this camp? Maybe that differs from this year, from previous years. I know in previous years you had the mayor of New York that showed up to one of your events at one of these camps, and you've gotten a lot of press. I read the New Yorker piece, which was super cool. I mean, all of this, and tell us what people can look forward to for this year's camp.
Yeah, it's as long and hard as it is to organize. It feels like an adult artist songwriters summer camp.
Cool.
It's just like an enthusiasm bubble for a week, where for just a brief moment we get to celebrate ourselves as creators. As you know, Ari, and as your listeners know, it is a lonely and hard road, and you're constantly comparing yourself to others on socials and on streaming services, and being able to break is almost impossible. Here's the thing: the most successful people feel the same way. And you would never know unless you talk to them. And to have, and I feel like there's an almost intentional ecosystem in which we are not openly talking to each other as a community, right? And so the more that we can have forums like this, Ari, and thank you so much for having me. And we go back as friends for a long time now, and we've created events together, and we want to continue to do that more. But this is really, people call it the highlight of their year. Cool. Because of that very reason, for this sense of community, and for feeling seen as we're weirdos, right? Like trying to explain to our parents what we're doing as artists and writers, like it's easy to forget, especially in like New York and LA and Nashville, that the average person doesn't understand what we do at all. And like your family probably doesn't understand at all. And your friends outside of music don't understand at all. So for all of us to get together in this big way with hundreds of us, right, who are enthusiastic and thoughtful and open, and share our experiences together, that's really something special. That's what I look forward to.
That's amazing. That's awesome. That's so cool what you've built up, Danny. And it's fantastic. It's a perfect segue to my final question, which I ask everyone who comes on the show. What does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Great question. Paying rent, if you can spend every day making music and not having to have a day job in which you're doing something else, then I think you've made it. It's not playing the garden. It's not playing the Greek. It's getting to spend your life making music and being creative and being around others who are creative.
Awesome. Danny Ross, it's great. Thank you so much.
Ari, thank you.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids with music by Brassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.